I'll give you another one. If I say horror novels, what's the first name that springs to mind for you? Stephen King, 0.25 of a second, and we all get the same name. The man who did for clowns what Spielberg did for sharks. Stephen King, one of the world's top-selling living writers today, despite runaway success stories like J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and 50 Shades of Grey. Interesting thing about Stephen King, when he started off, he wrote under two different names. And the first was his actual name, which really is Stephen King, and it's become iconic. The second was a pseudonym, Richard Bachman. Ever heard of that one? He wrote a novel under the Bachman name called The Long Walk. I read it about a year ago, and it's classic Stephen King. I mean, it'll haunt your dreams for days afterwards. And the interesting thing about that one is when they released it into the US market, it just about tanked. It sold about 40,000 copies, which in the US is very small. A couple of years later, they re-released the exact same book under the name Stephen King. And in half the time, it sold 400,000 copies. Same exact product, same exact market. The only difference was the name. There is equity in being the big name in your industry. When you position yourself as an expert in your world, things change and the business starts coming to you. There are at least 3 reasons it's worth your while to consciously position yourself as the top name, the top expert, and the top brand in your industry. And of course, it's not just for individuals, it's for businesses and for brands as well. It works just as well in that sphere. I mean, think about it. Even in South Africa, there are people who hoover their carpets. We don't use online search engines, we Google something. And here's a curious one. You can walk out of a filling station drinking a can of Sprite or a bottle of Fanta, and you went in saying, I'm going to go buy a Coke. Okay? It works for businesses and brands. When you are top of mind, it changes things in your world. So there are at least 3 reasons why it's worth your while to go to the additional effort of publicizing yourself and positioning yourself as the top name in your industry. The first and most obvious one is it's worth more. Experts earn exponentially more than the people around them. And the numbers can actually become crazy. If you're an unknown consultant, you go into a business in Johannesburg, you tinker with the guts of what they do, you spend months working with them. And at the end of it, you hand in your invoice and it has X number of zeros on the end. Next week, Richard Branson drops by, does a half-hour keynote, and they add 3 more zeros. And it's got nothing to do with how hard Richard Branson worked. It's the fact that he's Richard Branson. There is equity in being the top name. Take someone like Jeremy Clarkson. He's got the same raw materials to work with as just about every other motoring journalist in the world. But he wasn't out earning them on the order of, say, 10 to 1. It was closer to 100 to 1. It changes things dramatically. So that's the first reason, and it's the selfish one. Experts earn exponentially more. The second reason is perhaps a little bit more noble. By a quick show of hands, who here has got kids? And feel free to raise your hands if there's a good chance. Yeah. Most of the people in this room. You'll know how deeply rewarding it can be when you teach your child something that they didn't understand before. And there's that moment where the penny drops, the lights go on, and it's like their whole universe just got a little bit bigger. They have more levers with which to access the world around them. They can do more. Now, as an industry expert, you become something of a thought leader, and you get to guide where your industry is going. Instead of being a small cog in a system, you become one of the voices driving the entire machine, and that's deeply rewarding. And the third reason, this is perhaps the one that's the most interesting to us here today, is it changes how you go about your own sales and marketing efforts. In fact, it flips it on its head. When you start off positioning yourself as an expert, it is an uphill climb, and I'm inviting you to do a lot more work than most people will ever do. But there's this fascinating tipping point that happens somewhere down the line. You start off by having to push your name out there, push your brand, and try to create these tribes of believing followers. But at some point, it tips and it starts coming to you. And it's an amazing feeling when it happens. I had a very small example of this in my own world. When I'm not speaking on a stage, my universe is a lot less spectacular. I work from a small home office and I sit at my little computer, got a cup of coffee next to me and 2 snoring dogs at my feet. And one day, a few years ago, my phone rings. And I answer the call, and it's a lady calling from a large multinational organization. And I have no prior contact with them. I've never spoken to them. I don't know anyone from the brand. And she used a fascinating phrase. She said, "Someone told me that you're the person to talk to about." I thought, that's fantastic. And I put the meeting down in my diary, and my life went on. 20 minutes later, the phone rings again. And it's a guy calling from a different organization, another large one, and again, I've never spoken to them before. And he used the exact same phrase. Someone said, "You're the person to talk to." And the second time I put my phone down, the mood in my little office had changed completely. It went from, "Yay, that's awesome," to, "Hang on a second. How did that happen? And how do I keep making that happen over and over by design?" Because I'm sure you'll agree, that beats the heck out of cold calling. It's wonderful when the business starts coming to you. When your name appears at the end of the phrase, you know who you should talk to about that. When you, as an idea, become synonymous with an industry, that is incredibly powerful. So over the course of the years, I've been studying how to do this. I've written about it, spoken about it, I write books on it, I write articles on it, and the heart and soul of it is what I'd like to share with you this morning, is it really comes down to doing three things. I always like to say that real experts exist at the intersection of three ideas. And if you take one of the ideas out of the mix, you dismiss yourself, you dismiss your business, your brand, as a potential industry expert. They're very simple, but we have to use them. The first one is the one that we intuitively think of when we think of experts. It's fairly obvious. It's knowledge. Without the knowledge, without the technical skill and the know-how, you simply cannot be an expert in your industry. But unfortunately, for most brands, businesses, and aspiring experts, that's where we tend to stop. We think expertise alone is sufficient, and it isn't. There's more going on there. We have to add two more things to the mix before we can be seen as a top iconic brand. And the two things are personality and publicity. Personality and publicity. This is where the Jeremy Clarksons of the world, the Richard Bransons of the universe, separate themselves out from the pack. When we start off in any business, our heart's desire is to look like everyone else in that business sphere. When we get a little further down the line, we realize there is massive advantage in looking completely different, in standing out from the pack, and in being a personality. Take another example, Nigella Lawson. Nigella is a unbelievably high-earning expert in her world. Folks, do you think she is technically the single most qualified chef on earth? Do you think she's in the top 10 of the most technically qualified chefs on earth? So why is she out-earning all of them combined? And let's keep the answers to that politically correct. She's very much like a Jeremy Clarkson. There's something more going on there. She has brought personality to what she does, and the result is she creates tribes of believing followers. That's an interesting idea. There's an identity there. There's something to aspire to, something that people want to be around. So knowledge, personality, and publicity. There's a very simple formula by which to remember this one. If you have all the knowledge, but no personality, you are a specialist. If you have all the personality, but no knowledge, you are a Kardashian. Knowledge, personality, publicity. Put them together and take them on a roadshow, and it can change things for you. Experts earn exponentially more. Folks, what would it change in your world right now today if you could add an extra zero to your annual income? And I do mean on the right-hand side. What would that change in terms of how you would live? Not only that, but what would it change in terms of how you go about your business? The deals you would no longer have to do, and the type of clients that you would then start dealing with. The higher you move yourself up the scale, the more synonymous you become with that industry, the better the nature of the deals that come your way. So the ultimate goal for us is when people think of our industry, instantly your name, your business, your brand should spring to mind. Knowledge, personality, publicity. Take those three powerful ingredients on a roadshow and simply keep at it. And the more you do, the more you start hearing your name at the end of the sentence. You know who you should talk to about that. It's my fondest desire that in 2-3 years from today, after what will be a lot of hard work and a lot of investment, you'll find yourself in that dream car out there in traffic, thinking about how dramatically your life has changed. That it's not just the income, but the satisfaction with what you do. that the media is coming to you for your insights and guidance, that you're caught on this upward spiral of success, where the more business comes to you, the more the media associates you with the idea, the more they call on you to speak about that world, and the more people hear your name, and the more business comes to you, and you're caught on this spiral of success. My fondest desire for you that one day you'll wake up out in traffic and realize, I own my industry. I hope on that day you'll have a quiet smile to yourself and think back on how much it took and how far you've come. Thanks so much.